One of the hardest things for anybody who's crafting content for a brand is learning what's important. As you go into a company, whether you are on staff with that company or you are freelancing or you are consulting with that company, the idea is to get to the heart of the matter as fast as possible. Most brands fast forward straight to brand voice, right? And most content writers do this too. They think immediately, what I need to nail is the brand voice. But the voice is the vehicle for important content. And if you are not on the same page, every internal stakeholder, as far as who the company is, what the brand identity is, and what the core messages are, you can have all the voice and the style in the world, but no substance. All style, no substance. Do you watch Bake Off? I love it. Okay. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through an exercise. Really, it's just kind of a table in Google Docs that I developed 3 or 4 years ago when I started to realize I'm asking the same questions from all these different companies and clients, and I know I need the same elements in order to actually be successful writing content for them. So I'm going to take you through what I call a content mapping exercise, and we're going to look at some examples of how different companies have filled these out, and it's kind of going to help you understand what are those components, what are those pieces of that kind of together make up the message of who the brand is in the marketplace. That paired with brand voice and tone and all of that is going to give you the right combination of elements to succeed. Okay. I'm Joy Yule. I am the founder and director of Hire a Writer, which is a copywriting agency. I also run Baby Got Backlink, which is an SEO backlink company. I'm a copywriter, I'm a content consultant, and I train copywriters for a living. So I have a lot of experience trying to convey ideas like this and explain to people how important they are. I think this can be a really powerful tool for you if you add it into your own practice, whether you're a digital marketer, whether you're a copywriter, whether you're a freelancer, whatever you do. So subscribe to my channel, make sure that you like this video, and all of the information and the resource that I'm going to share with you today are in the caption. So be sure to head there if you want to kind of see more and dive deeper and actually use this tool. It's free. Okay, so let's talk about content mapping. The tool that I've essentially devised is pretty simple. Like I said, it's just a table in a Google Doc, but I want to talk you through the pieces of it and why I structure it the way I do. What I always want a writer, anybody in a brand, anybody in the marketing department to understand is that the very foundation of anything we ever say should be your core values and your mission statement and your vision statement. Most of the time, those are 3 distinct elements for brands, okay? So they've spent a lot of time usually putting effort into what their vision statement is, what their mission statement is, what their core values are. I realize I said the same thing twice, but I reiterated it on purpose because it is that important. It's on their website, it's on their branding materials, it's on their onboarding, right? But very rarely do those ideas tend to make their way into like a blog or an ad. But everything you say arguably should be based on those ideas. They've gone through probably a lot of exercises, a lot of activities, a lot of workshops, right? Deciding what those key elements are. If you, as a writer, even if you're just a blog writer freelancing for the company, don't know those basic components, you're going to say things that are mismatched, right? You're constantly going to get this feedback like, well, that's not really us, or that doesn't really sound like us, okay? So when it comes to how sounding like us, it's the marriage of that brand voice we talked about and the actual messaging themselves, the foundation of which is the brand tone and voice. So that's why I put it at the bottom like I do, because I really do want people to visualize it that way. Everything we say, the foundation of that is mission, vision, values, okay? So, yeah, you can kind of see there's, every brand has different ways of phrasing things like that, but it's very, very important. It's often an action statement. Sometimes it's just one statement. Sometimes it's multiple statements, and that's just a really powerful way to convey who they are in the marketplace, and you need to know what it is, okay? So that is something you should always ask. Do you have a mission statement? Do you have a vision statement? Do you have core values? Put those in this document, because the goal of this document is you have one page. Everybody can share, everybody can reference, everybody can look at to say, this is how we talk about this brand. Okay, super important for the content map. The foundation is those things. The second most important is not in and of itself marketing content in the sense that it's something you would ever really say explicitly. Although you might say pain points and value propositions in web copy or in a blog or in an ad or something like that. These are things that you decide in an audience segmentation workshop, which I actually also have. So I'll put a link to that in that video. I have a video, I have a free workshop, all that. When you go in and you're deciding who is our audience, how are we talking to them, what matters to them, that's when you start to nail down what are those pain points, and then flip side, what are the value drivers that incentivize them to pursue our solution. So the pain points and the value drivers propositions are going to be like one sentence statements that encapsulate the consumer experience, the consumer need and the consumer driver. So those two are really, really important components. I would say second only to the foundational content. A huge part of your content map. Again, if you start going off the rails, or if you say you have a big content team and you start having people with all these like really creative out of the box ideas, this creates a touchstone of like, does that make sense in light of the fact that we've decided based on our audience segmentation workshop, this is who we're serving, these are the segments of that audience, and these are the things they care about. The size of this document, let me go back to it so you can see it, is super important. It is one page on purpose, because the risk is that you get loquacious, you get verbose, you start diving into nitty gritty. The idea is that the simplest thing is the hardest thing to say. Succinct, concise, one sentence each. If you go beyond that, you will move past a content map into a content Bible or something, right? Which you don't want. The idea is that this is prescriptive. It's not just describe how the brand talks about themselves, it also sets a precedent for how the brand will talk about itself in the marketplace. So pain points, value drivers, succinct, short, has to stay on the content map, which is one page. Okay. Next is you get into a little bit of the marketing copy. Okay, so yes, these are marketing copy, but really they're more like marketing ideas, okay? And then you get into the elevator pitch, which is absolutely one of the most important pieces of content that you will ever write for a brand, because it's just what I said. It's the elevator pitch. So it's the time it would take somebody stuck in an elevator with somebody else going up and down a few floors to describe what the company is and what the company does. Okay. This is 3-4 sentences. I have a blog about how to write an elevator pitch if you go to the Hire Writer blog, but this is a really, really important exercise to have leadership weigh in on and to have sales weigh in on, because both of those groups of stakeholders have a lot of opinions about what a succinct answer looks like. You know that there is some work to be done if you go to a marketing team or a leadership team and they cannot tell you in 3 to 4 sentences what their company does. And you could do a real service to them if you get good at that and learn how to help them through that process, because it's not easy, right? Short things are a lot harder to write than long things. It can take, if it takes, 6 pages to say what a company does, that's not reasonable for digital marketing, because digital marketing delivery is by nature quick. It has to be, right? It has to be succinct. It has to be short. So the elevator pitch is what should go here, okay? And you should have that be kind of the third layer of content that you are writing about. Let me show you a couple of examples now that we're to this point, just because I want to make sure you're clear about what kind of stuff should be here. All right, so if we were to say the foundation is just that, like one sentence, maybe mission, vision, values, maybe they're just willing to use a tagline, and then you've got your pain points and your value propositions. Then you've got your elevator pitch. In an ideal world, this is a sentence, because then the salespeople, put their own spin on it. Whoever's saying it then kind of elaborates more specifically. But then right up from there, so that's what all that should look like. Again, your one page. You got to be ruthless with the editing on this, because it is so important that you can really, really be succinct. I'll show you another example here. So this is a company. They've got their foundation statement there. They've got their pain points, they've got their value proposition. They decided to word it as one, but it also addresses all 3 of the pain points. That's important. Those should match, okay? Those should be like the coin flip, that you've got both sides of that. And then you've got a great elevator pitch. This one is a little bit longer because it is kind of a complex company that they're in. All right. Then straight up from there is going to be your audience segments, okay? And this is really important to me, because there's a real risk of doing a lot of these kind of very brand identity heavy exercises and getting so abstract that you basically remove yourself from the idea that there's a reader at all. It's really important very quickly, and even on the content map itself, to state explicitly who you are talking to. Because no writer is going to write well if they're writing to the universe, if they're writing to everybody, if they're writing into the void. You want to write to a person. Visualizing that person, that individual, that group is going to help writing be personal. It's going to help writing feel warm and human and meaningful, right? So I always have audience segments listed directly on the content map. This also helps if, because this is a living document, right? It changes over time. Audience segmentation, if you watched that workshop video, it happens maybe once a quarter. You revisit, are we still talking to the same people? Has that group changed? Has something else come into the market that's kind of changed what they care about or who they are, okay? So you want to make sure this kind of remains as like the thing you would print out, the thing that you would keep front and center, the thing that you would point any writer, any marketer to as like the one-pager, summary document of the content messaging. So keeping those audiences front and center is really going to help ensure that you're writing to the correct people, that all of these messages are relevant to these people. And I kind of view this as like a filtration mechanism. So you start at the foundation, you go to the pain points and value propositions. That's immediately going to disqualify certain ideas, right? If you're ideating, if you're brainstorming, spitballing with content producers and ad ideas and maybe a content campaign or whatever, it's going to immediately take certain ideas off the table because you're like, actually, that doesn't matter to the people we're talking to, or that isn't why they would be motivated because we've already made these decisions with really important stakeholders and we know for certain that's really not kind of the direction to go. Same here, the elevator pitch, okay? And then you go into your audience segments. That's going to be another level of filtration. You're going to immediately start disqualifying certain ideas because you're like, we don't actually have an audience for that. We want to launch this campaign that's like nega marketing and it's weird and it's off the cuff and it's kind of a big question mark and it's all super creative and interesting and like the graphics team is stoked and all this, but then you get to the audience segments and you're like, right, but which of these people care about that? Like which of these people are going to consume content in that way? Like who are we appealing to? So it's another checkpoint within the content map that starts to filter out some of ideas to make sure that all your ideas are vetted in the real world, all of your ideas are relevant to real people. Okay, so it kind of creates that other, filtration process. Okay, so then we go into the actual content categories. So we've got the audience segments, and then we go into topical content categories. I find that having this in front of a client, a CMO, an executive team is really, really helpful because this starts to give relevance in the real world to some of these abstract sociological ideas, right? So we spend all this time like ideating, like our mission, right? It's so abstract and it's out in outer space and it's giant and it's the infinite game and we're, all these like very abstractions, right? And then we have like, okay, we're going into like the psychographics and the demographics, and then we're getting into the actual like sales pitch and our audience segments. This brings it to reality. Like, okay, how are we delivering all of this very important messaging? It also forces you to be then to start making those practical, tactical marketing decisions. Okay, we can't send this message. We're not sending this message out into the void. We're putting this message in an email. We're putting this message in a social post. We're putting this message on the blog. We're writing a lead magnet. We're doing guest platforms. It starts to give you some categories by which you're going to deliver all of these great ideas. So the ideological parameters that you set as you kind of filter up through this table then become practical. So from here, you create content calendars, right? From here, you schedule posts. Like this is where kind of all of the abstract meets the tactical, all the strategic meets the tactical maybe, and becomes really practical and applicable. So from here, you can say, like, these are the 5 areas of focus, right? These are the 5 areas with the kinds of content that we're going to create. And that creates some structure and some organization around it, right? And it's different for every client. So, it's different for every company. You're going to have different companies that have different areas and topical content categories. And some of this, so you're going to immediately notice, is flexible. I did this client very different than I did this client because they care very differently, and they have different audiences and they have different areas of impact and they have different business goals. Okay, so I want to let's talk about that for just 1 second. Every tool in the world, especially if you're a consultant, is meant to be a starting point. Its application varies based on who you're working with. Okay, I have tons of tools, tons of workshops I've developed over the years, tons of frameworks like this where I'm like, this is the map, right? This is the map. Every single client fills it in differently, and that's okay. Because the real value of it, yes, is having a touchstone, having a single source of truth to say, no, we're not going to talk about this because this is who we are. This is the core of our brand messaging. This is our map. That's why I call it that, right? This is the map that's going to chart the course for how we get messaging out into the world, right? For the kind of messaging that we're projecting out into the world. But for every company, it's a little bit different. So that's where and honestly, that's the value of a consultant, right? Is like, if this tool was just one size fits all and you could apply it in any circumstance and it would work perfectly, I mean, people should just download it and do it themselves, right? The value of somebody who has discernment, who's watched this work or not work in the real world, who's worked with comparable companies and teams and all, you can start to guide, right? You can start to shape it. You can start to say, like, these are the kinds of decisions that a company like yours should make. And these are the kinds of decisions a company like yours do make. How do you want to be different? How do you want to be the same? What's best practice? What's measurable, right? Like, so you start to kind of get into the nitty gritty of that and really guide somebody through this process, because it should be purpose built. It should be purpose driven. And the outcome of it is, yes, a single sheet of paper that says with confidence, this is how we're going to come across. But there is a lot of important conversations that happen getting this created. So this is typically about an hour workshop when I facilitate it, but then I do at least an hour or two afterwards, and then it usually goes through 3 or 4 versions, okay? So you want to make sure that it's not just an exercise that you're like, oh, but I know how to do this. I've got the answers, right? But that everybody who has input and should have input does, and their voice is kind of reflected in the decisions that get made. That's just good leadership, obviously. Okay, and then I want to illustrate that, I want to show you an example of one that is completely different. So like I said, I've done this workshop tons of times with tons of different companies. I ended up with one company where it just didn't make sense, the way that they were kind of structuring their company identity. It didn't really make sense to do the foundation up, even though that's the way I do it 95% of the time. It made more sense to me to kind of start at the foundation and go down. They had 2 big audience segments, and then they had sub-segments within that, and then they just had really in-depth pain points and really in-depth value drivers. And I just felt like the content map sheet just deserved more real estate for those things than I would typically have given it. And then we created, 3 topical categories: thought leadership, search, and sales enablement. And then we defined messaging platforms and content types. So that's just kind of an example of how this or any workshop should really evolve. You should let it take on a life of its own, let the right people have kind of a stake in what it becomes, because this isn't just about anybody getting their way. It's about everybody agreeing, gaining consensus, which is successful, on what the content plan is, right? And on how we're going to send messaging out into the world, what that messaging is going to be. Fine-tuning this is an endless process, okay? But you do have to get done. So, there's a balance, and you should definitely take control if you have it over the situation, and don't let this just linger. Don't let it, because you could ideate about this endlessly. You could agonize over every single word. Done is good. Assure people it's a living document that we will constantly be revisiting and refining, but make it something that people are happy with today, and then something that can kind of improve in the future, because you shouldn't take more than 2 weeks probably to finalize this, unless it's a brand new brand and you got a lot more branding kind of conversations to go. Content mapping. It is a powerful tool. It is something that every writer should learn how to do if you are working with digital marketing teams. And honestly, sometimes, even if this isn't an exercise that you have the right relationship with a client or a company to do collaboratively, it is something that you could just do yourself, right? You could go to their website, you could figure out what are the pieces of their messaging, what are they trying to say, and then use it as a touchstone for yourself as you're creating content for them. Not only would it be helpful and kind of constantly remind you of the things that they've already said are important or have emphasized in their digital properties, but it gives you an opportunity too to kind of showcase your value more. So as you're writing, it may be something that you fill in yourself and then simply send to the CMO or send to the executive team and say, hey, this is currently based on kind of just the collected content that I've, found across your website or whatever. This is kind of what I see. Is this true? Is this the right perspective? Are these the right messages? And kind of either get confirmation or have them kind of gut check themselves and be like, oh, wow, did we say that? Because they may not even realize. So there's a lot of ways that you can use this tool and add value to your own practice as you grow as a copywriter. Thanks for listening. Subscribe to my channel. Definitely subscribe to the Hire a Writer blog. If you're interested in refining your copywriting or messaging skills, we blog a ton and we have lots of great ideas, and I would be happy to see you on that email list. And I wish you all the best.